So I'm back with Musketeers, featuring Katrina. For this deck profile, I want to get a little bit more detailed with my card choices. I hope that it doesn't bore you guys. If it does, let me know. I probably won't do it again. And for all the deck profiles that we do, it's tailored towards our own local meta, so make sure that you change things as you see fit, and just use this as a solid baseline. And yeah, let's start off with our starter. Kira. You probably want to play specifically this card, just because she has Musketeer in her name. You have other cards that interact with Musketeer names, although it rarely even comes up. So any V starter is fine, cause draw and quick shield. For the grade 3s, we run 4 Cecilia reverse. Our entire deck basically revolves around her. So her long ass effect basically lets us rewrite or restand multiple times at the cost of locking your own cards. You can do either depending on the game state, but we're primarily focusing on the rewrite effect since that nets you the most advantage. Her first rewrite is always guaranteed because your strides can just straight up call it from the deck, and it's possible to rewrite multiple times after, but that'll depend on RNG. And that's usually through top checking abilities like her on attack ability to check for Cecilia names. Now this means that you can whiff, but the reward is quite high with multiple Vanguard and rearguard swings, 4 stacking, a bunch of drive checks, deck compression, and all that good shit. It is ultimately a high roll deck, but reverse is very solid in what she enables for this variant, so we play her for that reason. But also keep in mind that this whole locking effect needs your opponent to be on grade 3 or higher as well, so the only thing that you can really do is her on attack ability on your grade 3 write up. Your shenanigans start after you stride. Next we got the OG V Cecilia. This card is just terrible in today's meta, but we really only play her for the name. Reverse can rewrite any Cecilia name, and this is your next best option after reverse. You can mess around with how many you play in just to see what works for you, but I personally only play 2 just because of deck space. But otherwise, this card is complete brick, and you hate to draw or damage check it since you want to have as many copies as possible in the deck for the rewrite combo. It honestly doesn't matter which Cecilia you ride into, just make sure you ride into one of them. Now, hear me out on this. One really random copy of Ines. The reason why I play her, instead of like another Cecilia name or something, she has a lot of card compression in one card. For her on place ability, I'll talk about her cost real quick. It's Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1. Soul Blasting. It's basically costless in this deck. When your Cecilia's rewrite, she's basically soul charging herself, and when she does, she gets stuck in the soul unless you Soul Blast her out. That way you can start using other cards to recycle her from the drop zone. Now for her actual effect, she basically does the Musketeer thing where she can top check, so it's more chances to find Cecilia, she can draw you one, netting you a potential +2. And lastly, she shuffles the deck. You sometimes find very awkward situations where you bottom deck cards through your top checkers, your recycling cards, making whatever those cards are basically dead until you shuffle the deck. And Ines shuffling the deck can put them back into rotation for you. Certainly not a staple, it's more of a tech choice for myself because I find myself in those awkward situations. There are other variants that focuses on her Elder skill where she can gain a bunch of power in your opponent's turn, but we aren't really focusing on that. Although if the situation does come up, you can actually ride her and do some defensive plays, but you have to make sure to ride back into a Musketeer name for reverse's rewrite effect, otherwise you can only restand her. And lastly, Usurp. This card has so much synergy with this deck. In my opinion, it's a staple. We'll cut into another clip because it was totally not recorded at a different time, and I'll show you why. I might as well show you guys the basic attack pattern for this deck so you guys have some context. First, we'll usually swing with the Vanguard first, then the reverse, and make sure that she's called from the deck for maximum shenanigans. And after reverse attacks, you want to lock 2 standing units, usually one in the front so you can ride reverse. You swing with Vanguard next, popping 2 units, and this is where you usually want to check for Cecilia names. And let's just say we do. Cool. And now what you're also trying to go for is another rewrite, but the problem here is that we won't have enough cards to lock. Reverse's effect does everything in increments of 2, so you need to retire 2 units, you need to lock 2 units, so in this case, you won't have enough cards to lock. So realistically, your turn just ends like this. But if you set up this guy, every time a grade 3 or higher is placed on Vanguard Circle, he comes out from the drop zone, so let's reset. Okay, so just a small recap. Vanguard, reverse, lock 2, rewrite. So if you have Usurp in the drop zone, he comes out after rewriting. He acts as an extender, and he basically just refunded you an attack that you lost because you're forced to lock a front row unit. And this time you're actually in a perfect position to try to get another rewrite off that you couldn't before because you were lacking units. Our attack pattern here will differ a little as well. So you want to attack with the side here. You may boost if you like. We attack with Van, pop 2, and hopefully see a Cecilia name. Again, let's just say you do because you're a god. So then you want to swing with this Cecilia, triggering reverse effect to lock these two and to rewrite a Cecilia name. Then you once again call out this guy, and that's pretty much it. There's other variations on how you attack with this deck, but with this type of board, this is pretty much the gist of it. So yeah, we just covered the basic attack pattern for this deck, high rolling with Cecilia, and pretty much showing you why this card is so damn important. So yeah, cool. Okay, as you see, it's a very good card. I played 2 copies because while the first one can already do the job, the second one gives you further high roll potential. I don't want to talk about this card forever, but there's a lot of intricacies that you guys can probably figure out as I go through the rest of the deck. Honestly, you probably have to actually play the deck in order to find out, but I can't stress how important this card is. Just play it. On to the grade 2s. We have 4 Saul. This is by far one of the most important cards in this deck. For Soul Blast and Retire, he top checks. If you call a trigger, you may counterblast 1 to activate the trigger. So obviously top checking is very good to find your Cecilias. The counterblast effect is also very helpful in some situations. And this effect makes him an amazing Rain Breath target to force the defensive on your opponent's turn. Even if you don't hit triggers, you can find random intercepts to call and filter out the deck to move closer to the triggers, since he's one of the few that bottom decks the cards you top check, and that's super good. He just enables so much shenanigans that he's way too good not to play. He's good at every stage of the game, and he's not even once per turn, so spam away if the situation calls for it. Next we have 4 Sylvia. This is one of your most basic token generators for a grade 2. Card lets you token spam, gives you retire and lock fodder, and just a note, when locking tokens, they just disappear off the board, so that potentially enables even more high roll plays, since it clears the circle for anything that can plus to the field like more token generators or usurp. And another note, token generating is actually one weird way to play around disruption. One way to stop this deck from going off is by nuking the cards off the field, because as I showed you, this deck generally needs a full board to go off. So if your opponent doesn't know, or they time it wrong, or it's limited like it's an Owl Griffin or something, token generators could just repopulate the board again. And token generating is more important than ever now since Katrina's back. Next we have Augusto. He's really only here for his recycle effect, because you actually do need to recycle sometimes, mainly Cecilia names. He's a big shield, and nets you a draw 1. He's a very nice card to randomly drive check into as well, but he is very clunky to use, so I wouldn't play too much copies if I were you. 1 is usually fine for me. And lastly for the grade 2s we play 1 Favila. She was a very clunky card to use. She still is, but since Katrina's unbanned, you could easily search her. She and one of your on-place Musketeer units gain resist and 6k, so that does help with your rewrites to go off better, and the 6k does help with hitting bigger numbers. Although to be honest, because she is once per turn, she can only protect so much. There are actually many different windows to stop your plays. So against certain matchups, you're going to get interrupted either way, but this just allows some chance at continuing your plays in case the matchup is really bad for you. Okay, so now for the grade 1s. We got Ruth. Past the first few turns, this card is no longer a token generator, which makes her a lot less usable now that we want an ass ton of token makers for Katrina. But she does end up being your most optimal ride target just for the token generation alone, and that makes her worth playing. When I'm forced to go first, what I like doing sometimes is rewrite this over my grade 1, so I can have the extra tokens, and that lets me try to force my opponent to ride up as well. The counter charge is clunky because she needs to retire herself from the board, which is counterintuitive to this deck's gimmick, but as long as you're able to replace her in the main or battle phase, she becomes a sufficient countercharger. Next you have Flower Carpet. Just another token generator for your token generating needs. You need a sufficient amount of tokens for Katrina because this is built around her, so make sure to play however much you see fit. She has a drop zone effect which rarely comes up, but it's there for the utility that you almost never use in case you ever need it. 3 Sweetberry. Still one of the best Neo Nectar cards, although in this deck, the Soul Charge can actually hurt you because you don't want to accidentally mill your Cecilia names. You sometimes also go through your deck super fast, so you don't want to risk stacking out. And we actually want to Soul Blast instead of Soul Charging. Weird, I know. So we mainly have her for the 13k in tokens. Still a good card nonetheless. G Sweetberry. She was really only in here for Lotus Lava, but because Lotus Lava is no longer your go-to stride, G Sweetberry is a lot less useful now. But I still like that she offers an alternate way of guaranteeing reverse or any other card that you have on board instead of relying solely on Katrina or Lotus Lava. You can easily replace her for any other card if you don't like her, but she's a great card to randomly call off Katrina since most of the things you call are just for lock fodder anyways. She can be there to set up for next turn plays, and she works really well with strides that don't call reverse out. Susanna. Just another simple countercharger. Her cost is Soul Blast 2 for a countercharge 2. Helps with getting them Cecilias out of soul in bulk for when you want to recycle them, and she plays perfectly into Augusto and Robertina. Ursula. Just like Favila, she's a resist unit in the form of a grade 1. You can put this behind the attacking column with the rearguard Cecilia, and it becomes a lot harder to interrupt. Against certain matchups, it becomes an untouchable column since as long as you don't lock or retire Ursula, she will pass resist onto all the units jumping in and out of that column. Resolving that Cecilia and Usurp loop is how you gain most of your advantage. Hanali. Much like most of your other cards, this card is easily tutored. Everyone knows Hanali, it works very well against those multi-attack matchups where you really need to slow down. If this card is on your side of the field, you can just lock this unit so it doesn't even hurt you at all, and it's obviously a very good rain breath target to drop mid-battle. Finally, Sanctitude. So through testing, I realized that not every deck needs to play this. If your deck is capable of searching it with ease, it's kind of a no-brainer. If your deck doesn't care too much about defending and just looks to kill or really needs to see their combo pieces to go off, then I can see you not playing this card at all. But for us, we can actually pinpoint search this, and we get a bunch of drive checks, along with deck compression, that we'll probably see this card anyways. This deck also has pretty good choices for PGs, in case you have the room. You have Kira for her recycle ability. You also have Lilga, in case you want to do the bloom play with Katrina and add a bunch to hand. It really comes down to what you want to try. Nectar is so versatile now, so you do you. Triggers. Not much to say about the triggers here, it's all personal preference. 4 stride crits, because you need a stride. 2 GB crits. His into soul effect is completely useless to us. This is probably going to change into the new erotic crits when we can make the change. Yeah, this one, Milas. This isn't an Asha deck, so the soul effect is also useless for us, but the draw and defensive is for a stronger early game. The draw is just good in general, but for those matches where the grade 2 game is more important, where we need to get the first stride or just need to survive early game, the draw is for that reason. If for whatever reason you want to continue using Happy Lucky, you can. Just be careful how you use his skill because he does remove himself from the field too. Tool Lane. I play him for his card compression. He's a crit and countercharges when placed by a Musketeer effect. With Katrina, I don't really even run into much countercharging problems now, so I play less of him. If you're going for a more Musketeer heavy build with Tories and shit, playing 4 might be the better option because you'll be counterblasting a lot more. I also don't like his low stats, but his effect more than makes up for it when you need the extra countercharging, and he combos really well with Saul. Well, he combos really well with all the triggers, but this one makes him super free. 3 draws. If you don't want to play these, I already showed you what you can play. Again, the draws are more for early game, so I choose the draw PG. You can never go wrong with heals. Helps with early game, surviving, G Guardians, 6 damage heals. Very nice. And the over trigger. It sucks that we can still play this, so we need to play it. If you sack an OT on a rearguard Cecilia, you can just freestand her and then swing twice with her. I don't like that this is a thing, but it's a thing. So on to the strides. We have Katrina and her pet Cyclone. I don't think I need to explain much about this package. It's incredibly busted, but Nectar honestly really needed this. Katrina searches you everything and Cyclone scales. You can definitely mess around with the ratios here, but to me this is fine for now. Next, Ladislava. She was originally the main stride for this deck, but since Katrina's back, she became a lot less needed now. She does offer another form of toolboxing that Katrina doesn't. She lets you search literally anything from the deck as long as you have that grade to target. One to field and one to hand. So for example, there would be times where you need to go into her because you need something like Elementaria in hand. You target grade 1, search Elementaria, call G Sweet Berry to then use her effect, call Reverse, to continue your usual play. So she's here to help you search cards. Again, it's a lot less needed now, but that's worth slotting in just for this utility. She also has a really gimmicky way of multi-attacking by counterblasting. I don't like it, but it's there. Invernal. There will be times where you might have went through too many Cecilias, or you've seen too many of them or whatever. Basically, you just need to recycle the Cecilias, and she's here for recycling in the form of a stride. She doesn't guarantee you reverse unlike Katrina or Ladislava, but if you have a Top Checker or G Sweet Berry, you can still do your thing after recycling as long as you're somehow able to call reverse from the deck. This is sometimes my second or even third stride if I fail to kill my opponent with Katrina. I highly recommend playing at least one of her just for her recycling ability. Last stride, we have Megaloma. You really have to think hard about whether you should go into this card or not. You can go into this and hopefully live next turn, then on your following turn, stride into Katrina for free, generating you a completely free board. But then you also need to ask, why don't you just go into Katrina now, do your thing, hope to win before you die? I don't know, maybe because you have a bad hand, not enough tokens and shit? Because in theory, going into Katrina for free, also generating a free board for free, sounds very good. But like I said, it's all just theory, it has yet to come up. It's really in here just for fun. And most of the time, you really just go into Katrina and try to win that way. But you can remove it and play something else if need be. Now finally, G Guardians. 2 Rain Breath. I'll say this again and again, this is one of the best things about Nectar besides Katrina. You can call cards from hand, activate abilities on your opponent's turn, pretty decent shield value, and gives the unit you call resist. Why does it give resist? I don't know, ask Bushi, but I'll take it. 2 Robertina. Free 30k shield, she recycles dupe names and countercharges. Perfect for Cecilia variants. Ontero. Biggest shield you have for a G-Guardian at the cost of a measly Soul Blast. Very nice. Katrina. Rain Breath for the cost. She can get bigger than Rain Breath, but it's really only here for GB acceleration in case you need more tokens for Katrina on your following turn. And finally, Dismal. Typically, if I'm playing a deck that has cards worth protecting like Hanali, I usually auto-include Dismal unless I really have no space. Okay, so I guess some closing thoughts as usual. This deck is actually pretty strong when it does its thing. But the question is, can you get to the Katrina turn? Even though Nectar does have a very solid grade 2 game with the token rushing and the free cards you call, you're still committing a lot of cards to do that, and while they do plus, it's not plussing to hand, it's plussing to field. So their defense pretty much weakens over time if both players refuse to ride up. Speaking of riding up, ride down is still going to be a thing post-history collection. Ride down will always be great against decks with shitty grade 3 turns, and that's actually mostly Nectar. Nectar grade 3 turns are actually pretty weak. So it's usually GG when you get rolled down on. You essentially have to get to the stride turn to really go off, let alone needing to high roll into your Cecilia plays because again, you need to first stride. A lot of decks can actually just outright kill you before this can even happen, and quite a few decks are very capable of that. They could have a very strong grade 3 game, or their grade 2 game is actually better than yours. If they happen to have a better grade 2 game than you, they can actually just force you to ride up, you do nothing, and then you're probably just gonna die. Also, this deck will just auto-lose to some control matchups. Some are better than others to deal with, but matchups like Mega Colony, just handshake. Anything that could hard disrupt you, you're very likely going to lose those games because you usually require a full board for your plays, and there are many windows of stopping those, despite your resist units if you even play them at all. That said, the deck is honestly still very strong because Katrina. This is a high roll deck, but even if you don't high roll, you're exerting a lot of pressure early, you're getting a good number of attacks in, you're getting at least a re-ride, you're setting up your board, toolboxing, plussing, it's all great really. When you do high roll, it's actually quite disgusting, because suddenly, you're plussing so hard while depleting your opponent's resources, and you're also compressing your deck like crazy for triggers. Even if they sack defensives, they can't PG them all, so they have to usually take more risks, guarding lower just to survive. It almost feels like a Highlander turn if anything. This deck scales, and I've ended a lot of games on first stride only, and if I ever needed to reach second stride, I most likely won anyways, so that's pretty dang good if you ask me. As it stands now, I'm sure Nectar will stay tops again, maybe or maybe not this variant, but Nectar will. They are once again competitive because Katrina is just that busted. So thanks a lot, Bushi. Anyways, thanks for watching. Any comments, questions, nothing, let us know. Later guys.